So I wanted to return to a comment you made earlier about the generation of lost boys. You likened them to the Peter Pan movie.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So when we're talking about red pill media as being a large influence, and I wanted to define that. It's a reference to the Matrix in which a lot of these media heads
No, I'm familiar with that.
talk about unplugging yourself. And it's about waking up to the realization that there is an active attack on masculinity, that men's rights need to be, that men are being oppressed in a way, and that men's rights need to be advocated for. Many people have attributed the red pill media to a rise in this almost generation of lost boys. I kind of wanted to get your opinion on do you see this generation of lost boys as a failure of, say, masculinity, or are there potential other factors, economic, social factors, such as, the death of the American dream, increasing costs of living in America, increased costs of education? Are there any other reasons as to why this generation of lost boys might exist, or do you basically attribute it to just...
I acknowledge all of that, of course. One of them, it's a very good faith question, and thank you. In America, we made a stupid decision in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s to shut down our factories in the middle part of the country and basically disenfranchise and deindustrialize tens of millions of working class men and tell them to go move to the cities and learn to code. I said this in the previous Q&A, but I can again, which is that a family used to be able to be supported on a single income of 35 weeks of labor a year. Now it takes upwards of 60 weeks of labor a year. However, given all the economic and social and all those factors, the largest of all of them is the cultural and the educational that has infantilized men and hyper-feminized them in the messaging, in the outreach, and in the treatment. And so I can give you specific examples.
In what way has the education system infantilized men?
I mean, every possible way, from the hypermedication of young men, from in the core curriculum in America, we learn about toxic masculinity from ages 8 in public schools in California and in New York. We never talk about toxic femininity. Do you agree that there's toxic femininity as well?
I mean, I think it's an unfair double standard.
Why? Well, how can femininity not be toxic if masculinity can?
I'm not saying they can't be.
Do we teach kids about toxic femininity in our schools? No, tell me yes or no.
I mean, I think that they come from two very different places. I think toxic masculinity comes from a level of misogyny, where I think toxic femininity often comes from a reaction to a misogynistic system which fundamentally oppresses and systematically oppresses women. And I'm not saying that toxic femininity is a good thing, but I'm saying it's a much more understood and valid reaction to a system of oppression versus toxic masculinity, which oppresses.
Okay. So even if I grant you that, are they teaching toxic? Has that term ever been used in a school that you know of?
What term?
Toxic femininity?
No, it's not.
Oh, that's weird. So only one sex gets criticized and called toxic. Maybe that creates a backlash.
Well, because one is creating a system of oppression.
Oh, no, that's your interpretation. No, you can make every excuse under the book that you'd like, but only one chromosome set gets criticized, called that they're terrible and awful, and that women basically need to be go into the corporate world with no reservation, and young men see this pattern in the West and in our country from the authors, from the curriculum, from the music, from the movies, and we see, and of course, again, in the educational system proper, we have seen the infantilization of the young male. And so again, we know the data, you did agree to it, that young men are checking out completely, but we're actually living under a hyper-feminist West that is toxic. What does that mean? Speech police, feelings first, emotion over reason, community over individualism. We're seeing this, and by the way, is it working? Is the West stronger as it's become more feminine in the last 30 years? No. In fact, our morale is weaker, we're more suicidal, our fertility rates are down, we have lost the balance, we've lost the yin and the yang between the male and the female. We lost what worked, and we have hyper-platformed. Your own prime minister, Boris Johnson, when he was talking at a summit, said we need to actually make things more feminine. Could you imagine if he said we need to make things more masculine? How does that sound to a dock worker in Brighton or someone in Essex? We need to make things more feminine? No. Instead, we need to restore the balance that God created man and women, and right now and by the way, you want an example? Adolescence. How does that movie Adolescence not broadly generalize a theme that, first of all, doesn't exist, secondly, is like a slow motion, like humiliation ritual for the young boys of Britain. Could you imagine if there was a similar movie criticizing young women that are like how they are the ones that are driving men away, about how catty they are, about how they don't want to be. No, it's fine. I'll just complete the point. I could give you data point after data point, and I would ask you the question: has the West grown stronger the more effeminate has become?
Okay. You've said a lot.
Yes, that's how a Q&A works. You ask the question and I answer. So I am the speaker. You know that's how it works.
That's my turn. Thank you. Okay, so on your point about adolescence, I don't think adolescence is a generalization. We are not saying that every young boy in the UK is like this. We're not saying every young boy goes through this process. It's an example of what can happen when people fall into this kind of media. I think it's like, and it's more of a story or a warning to what can happen to people that, you know, fall into these bubbles, who don't find the help that they necessarily need, that can turn violent. And like, this is a perfect example of toxic masculinity, in which the boy feels like he's not affirmed in his masculinity and takes that out on women. Like that, we've also then seen like within men, like the largest contributor to like men's deaths right now is male suicide. Like, but I would argue that is not a factor of feminization, but instead a factor of masculinity. The idea that men can't be in touch with their feelings. You talked about a feeling first approach being effeminate. So men are simply not allowed to engage with their feelings at all. Like men not allowed to talk about their feelings. These are large contributors to a massive problem within men's spaces that lead to what is the highest contributor to men's death, suicide. And I think this idea that, you know, men simply go back to work and if they're economically assured, then suddenly everything is fine. And, you know, men's mental health was never an issue before like the 90s or whatever it was when we used to start affirming men's mental health, I think is an unfair, it's an unfair point to make. And I think it doesn't speak to a lot of issues that a lot of young men face. And I think it's a dishonest way to go about talking about this conversation.
Okay, so which part would you like me to respond to?
Let's go to the point about male suicide and masculinity not being allowed to affirm.
So to your point, if it was true that men have always been miserable, why have the suicide rates gone up?
Well, because we've started recording suicides better. It's not to say that suicides didn't occur on this level. It's just we simply have better ways of recording. And
that's rubbish, and you know it. Body bags are data that transcends any sort of manipulation. A self-inflicted gun wound or being hung, it was not like a mass reporting issue 60 years ago in this country or in the West. It is a material fact because we know it's happening in the Anglosphere. It's happening in Australia, it's happening in America, it's happening all across Europe, that suicide rates of men are going up. Depression is going up. Yes. They are correlated together. It's not a reporting issue. There's something undergirding it. And in fact, just one other thing, your own prime minister endorsed adolescence. He sent out a tweet saying, I was shocked to the core when I watched this film and everyone should watch it. So that is an endorsement from the top leader, other than, you know, the king of this country, of endorse. I don't even know, may the king endorse that.
I mean, an endorsement is not a generalization.
Well, hold on. No. He said, I'm troubled to the core of what this could become. And you have to, again, that is one example of thousands that I could give, one that is the most applicable to here to this country. And I guess I would just ask this question in closing. Do you think men would be happier if they are married and providing for a family?
I don't think marriage or the institution of marriage is the only way a man can be happy.
That's not what I said. I said generally happier. Do you think men will be generally happier if they're married, providing, and have children?
I don't think that's a necessary factor to contribute to men's happiness.
What is your solution to bring about male happiness in the West? Mine is men get married, have children, and provide. What is yours?
That's a big question. I think an affirmation of their emotions, their emotional states.
We've tried that.
I think an openness to allowing men to express themselves in whichever way they want, even if that is in a more effeminate way or a Western, typically effeminate way. I don't think it's about ostracization. I don't think it's about promoting one simple institution of living and disregarding all of those else. Men are free to live single, men are free to be in gay relationships. I don't think that the institution of marriage privileges one to a life of happiness over any other way of living.
So of course you have the agency to do that. With all due respect, have you been to London the last 10 years? Men can do whatever they want.
I live in London.
Are they happier? Men can dress how they want. men can act how they want and go to any club. Has it worked?
Yeah, but also we've had austerity. There are other factors outside of simply just
Do you see what you're doing,
cultural
respectfully?
factors.
You're scrambling for an excuse to get away from the truth that's right in front of you.
I mean,
maybe men should get married and have children.
Okay, but I think
because it's worked for 2,000 years.
I just think it's a very dishonest way to go about this argument, that there's only one issue.
Interesting. Can I challenge you on that, though?
Sure.
Why is it that the men of much poorer African and Asian countries don't have suicide issues, yet they have no money?
How do we know that?
Oh, we know. Again, by empirical third-party reported data from the UN, from the US State Department, there is not a suicide crisis in sub-Saharan Africa. There's not a suicide crisis in Southeast Asia with young men. So explain to me that phenomenon. They're materially wealthy, they're not materially wealthy, and yet they're harming themselves. So why would you then say it's austerity?
Wait, sorry, say that again?
Okay, you're looking for another explanation for male unhappiness.
Yes.
I'm pointing to you to a part of the world that actually does value marriage and does have children, but they have no money. So therefore, how could you say it is a material problem why the men of London, who can dress how they want, go to whatever bar they want, are not happy?
Because it's more than one reason. Like, there are multiple factors. It's not just like, it's not even just economic. There's economic, there's social, there's like religious pressures. There's so many, like, you cannot boil down a societal issue to like one.
And I acknowledge
issue.
that, right? I even at the beginning, remember, I'm saying the biggest, the one that has an exponent on it, is that we have a biological urge that God gave us when he designed us, which is to be fruitful and multiply, for men to provide for the family. And when we suppress that, and we say that you can go live whatever lifestyle you would like, as already happens in the West. We have Exhibit A. We have a serious suicide, mental health, anxiety, depression issue. So I would just ask you to think over the next couple of days, months, or years, why is it that men in countries that barely have toilets and do not have 2 pounds to rub together, but they do have kids and they do have a wife, are much happier than someone with a big flat in downtown London? Something to think about.
I mean, I think happiness is a difficult idea to conflate in that sense. I mean,
No,
there are other
suicide.
duties.
They're less likely to kill themselves. Forget all these happiness indexes. If you kill yourself, you're not happy, right? So these poor countries do not have male suicide problems. Why?
I do not know.
Think about it. Thank you very much.